Van Johnson's life is an example of how old Hollywood worked. It shows how they made stars, kept them safe, and sometimes kept them quiet. Van Johnson was born Charles Vanel Johnson on August 25, 1916 in Newport, Rhode Island. He did not have a lot of money when he was young. He became a very popular actor at Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer. People liked Van Johnson because he seemed like a guy. He was charming, had a warm personality. Van Johnson also looked clean-cut, which meant he had a good image. During World War II, Van Johnson represented hope for people. This was a time when people in America needed to feel better about things. Van Johnson helped people feel that way. Behind the picture, people saw there was a man who was really scared and had to keep a lot of things secret. He had to be strong without anyone knowing because the business he was in did not let people be themselves. The man had to deal with fear and secrecy and still find a way to keep going by himself in a world that did not care about what he was really going through. Johnson's life was really tough when he was a kid. His dad, his mom, Loretta Snyder, had to take care of him. She thought it was great that Johnson liked to perform, so she encouraged him to keep doing it. When Johnson was a teenager, he started to like theater and music a lot. He even moved to New York City to try to become an actor. Johnson's time on Broadway was not easy at all. He had to take roles, and he did not have a lot of money. He was not sure if he would make it as an actor. Johnson did not give up. He kept trying. It paid off when people from Hollywood saw how good he was on stage and how young and appealing he was. Johnson's Broadway experience was still really important to him, and Hollywood scouts noticed Johnson, which changed everything for Johnson. Johnson's move to being a movie star happened after he signed with MGM. At first, he had parts in movies. During World War II, he became really popular. Johnson was different from the heroes in old movies. He played the guy. Johnson was a guy. He showed his feelings, and people could understand him. This made his movies during the war really good. In these movies, the soldiers were shown as people who felt scared, who had friends, who gave up things for others, and who loved people. They were not superheroes. Johnson was great at playing this kind of role. He made the soldiers in his movies seem like people with real feelings, like the everyman. In 1943, something terrible happened to Johnson. A big camera thing fell on his head when they were making a movie called A Guy Named Joe. He had big scars on his head. They even had to put metal plates in his skull. It took him a time to get better, and it was very painful. The doctors did not think Johnson would make it. When he started acting again, people liked him even more. They saw something in Johnson, a new kind of weakness and feeling in the way he acted. Johnson was really popular in the 1940s. He was in movies like 30 Seconds Over Tokyo, Battleground, The Caine Mutiny, and In the Good Old Summertime. These Johnson movies showed he could do lots of things like war movies, romantic comedies, and musicals. Johnson usually played characters who were loyal and did the thing. This made people trust Johnson. People felt like they knew Johnson, like he was a friend or a brother. This feeling helped Johnson stay famous. Johnson was an actor, and people loved watching Johnson movies. Johnson's life was really complicated when he was not in the eye. He liked to keep to himself and had a time dealing with all the things the movie studio expected him to do. The studio, MGM, had a lot of control over what Johnson did not in his movie roles, but also in his personal life. This made it hard for Johnson to be himself or show his feelings. Even though people did not think he was as big of a star, in the 1950s and 1960s Johnson still worked a lot in movies, television, and theater. He had learned a lot from his experiences. This showed in his work, giving it a lot of depth and meaning. Johnson continued to work in the entertainment industry, including film, television, and theater, and his life experiences gave him an understanding of things. In 1947, Johnson married Eve Abbott, who was a stage actress. This was a deal, and lots of people talked about it like it was a fairy tale. Johnson and Eve Abbott had a daughter named Skylar. Johnson loved Skylar much. Eve Abbott already had 2 sons, and Johnson became their stepfather. One of her sons was Tracy Keenan Wynn. He later wrote screenplays. Johnson tried hard to be a good husband and father. After a while, things got tough because of problems at home and at work. So Johnson and Eve Abbott stopped living in 1961. They got divorced in 1968. Johnson and Eve Abbott were not together anymore. Eve Abbott said that Johnson was gay after they broke up. She said their marriage was for show so people would not think Johnson was gay. This kind of thing happened a lot in Hollywood. People did not like homosexuals then, so it was a big secret. If someone found out you were gay, you would lose your job. Johnson even said that a lot of marriages in Hollywood were fake. He said some people got married just to keep their jobs, not because they loved each other. Johnson talked about how some Hollywood marriages were not real, and Eve Abbott said the thing about her marriage to Johnson. Johnson and Eve Abbott both said that their marriage wasn't one, like some other Hollywood marriages. Later in his life, Johnson would sometimes talk about his life in private. He said that he had been in love with men when he was working in Hollywood. This was a scary time for him because the movie studios were always watching him. They were afraid that people would find out about his relationships with men. Johnson knew that if people found out, it would ruin everything he had worked for as a movie star. He believed that being honest about his life would destroy his career. Johnson had relationships with men during Hollywood's golden age. Montgomery Clift is the person who comes to mind. People say Johnson thought Montgomery Clift was an emotional and sensitive person. Montgomery Clift was the kind of man who wore his heart on his sleeve, and that made him very attractive to people but very fragile. Johnson said that his relationship with Montgomery Clift was very private. They understood each other in a way that few people did. Both Montgomery Clift and Johnson felt like they were stuck in roles they could not really fulfill. They found comfort in each other's company away from the rest of the world. Number 2 is Tab Hunter. Johnson said that Tab Hunter was a guy, but he was also very frightened and really young. Tab Hunter became famous in the 1950s. The movie studio made Tab Hunter go on dates with women so people would think he was straight. If Tab Hunter actually had a relationship with someone, it was always very short. Had to be kept secret. This was because Tab Hunter was afraid of what might happen, not because he was free to do what he wanted. Johnson said that Tab Hunter hated pretending to be someone he was not more than anything. Number 3 is Rock Hudson. There is no proof that they were in a relationship, but Johnson apparently knew that Rock Hudson was one of them, actors who were living double lives. Rock Hudson knew how to play the game. He would go out with the people he was supposed to go out with, and he never made any mistakes. These men, whether they were friends or people they trusted, had a connection that helped them cope with the fact that they had to hide who they really were in a business that was all about pretending. Rock Hudson was part of this group. He understood the rules. Johnson said that the relationships he had were not something that happened by chance, but they were necessary for him to survive. Johnson had to be very careful and secret about these relationships, so he would plan to meet people through friends he trusted. They would talk in private. Johnson was not as worried about people finding out about his personal life as he was about being honest about what really happened. Johnson did not feel bad about the love he had. What bothered him was the fear that came with it. Johnson wanted people to know the truth about his life and the relationships he had. Like Johnson said, he was afraid of being found out, not of the love itself. In the 1990s, Van Johnson stopped being in the public eye. Van Johnson then lived in New York. Van Johnson had a place in a Manhattan penthouse. Then Van Johnson moved to assisted living in Nyack. Van Johnson died on December 12, 2008, when Van Johnson was 92 years old. This was the end of Van Johnson's life, which was a part of Hollywood's golden age, with all the good and bad that came with it. Remembered for his warmth, resilience, and understated courage, his story stands as a testament to those who were present, but never allowed to be seen. Van Johnson's story is really about being strong and getting through times. He was a movie star in a time when people expected him to be perfect when he was acting and quiet when he was not. Van Johnson had to keep some things to himself so he could keep working. So Van Johnson was able to make people feel better and give them hope when they saw him in movies. Van Johnson showed people that they were not alone, and that is what made him special. By acknowledging the men he loved and the life he was forced to hide, his story now stands as a reminder of the cost of fame in old Hollywood, and of the quiet courage it took simply to exist. His legacy endures not only in the films he made, but in the honesty he claimed at last, proving that even in secrecy, a life can still be lived with dignity.